Maybe you're starting to explore a career as an appraiser and want to know if now is the right time to get started. Or you're measuring your career span in decades and want to find out more about the latest apps, technology, and resources that can make your life and work a bit easier. Get the answers and insight you need with Beyond the Numbers, a podcast from McKissock Learning. I'm Julie Mollendorp-Floyd, course and curriculum developer and instructor here at McKissock. Join me and an expert guest each week as we dive into the topics that matter most to appraisers, from industry and education news to marketing and other insights to help you run your business more effectively. If you'd like to stay at the forefront of appraisal news, boost your career, or just learn more about the profession, subscribe to Beyond the Numbers with McKissock Appraisal at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Hope to see you there soon. Welcome to Beyond the Numbers with McKissock Appraisal. I'm Julie Mollendorp-Floyd, course and curriculum developer for McKissock, and today I'm joined by the amazing Malinda Griffin. Malinda is a certified residential appraiser in South Carolina, not to mention the incoming president of the National Association of Appraisers and the newly installed vice chair of the Appraisal Foundation Advisory Council, also known as TAFAC. She is a force to be reckoned with when it comes to networking and diversifying her practice. Today, she is going to share her insights around divorce appraisals. We're going to talk specifically about what they are, how they differ from traditional mortgage-based appraisals, and how offering this service can diversify your business. She'll also share some secrets on how to get in the door with your local family law attorneys, and let's see if you agree with me that she would be tough to say no to. So welcome, Malinda. Thanks for taking time out of your crazy schedule to be with us today.
Good morning, Julie. It's a pleasure to be here always. It's an interesting avenue to travel down when you're doing divorce appraisals.
Tell us a little bit how you got started in doing appraisals for divorce situations.
Well, Julie, back in 1990, just after I'd had my baby son, who is now 34, I did some abstracting for titles. Some people call it paralegal work, but really I just abstracted titles at the courthouse for attorneys. It was a subcontract kind of work, kind of like what we do as an appraiser. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a subcontract piece of work. And then my dad said, Malinda, you need to diversify. You can't have all your eggs in one basket. Right. And so, I listened and I became an appraiser. I took the classes. It was a little different to get in the door back then, you know. But working with the attorneys, I quickly realized that, hey, they're going to court. Mm-hmm. They've got to have an appraisal for that. Right. I wonder if I could do that. So I talked to one of my appraisers and one of my attorneys and said, and he said, I would love to have you. I think that my client, who was a female, would be more comfortable with you. Okay. So I went out there, and then the attorney schooled me. We did an interview. We did a mock trial, so to speak, right, of what questions I may be asked on the stand, what questions to answer and what not to answer. Wow, that's invaluable. That's amazing. It was. It truly was.
So we know most residential appraisers focus on lending-based work. What do our listeners and maybe new appraisers to this type of appraisal, what do they need to know about how divorce work differs from traditional lending work?
Divorce work differs because you're not bound to a form at all. Mm-hmm. You're not bound to the 1004. You are bound to USPAP. Sure. Anytime you're quoting value, you have to adhere to all of the USPAP standards. But you can do a narrative report. You can do a verbal report. You can do a lot of different things to make your job a lot simpler. And you can give a credible report without a form, guys.
Okay. So no 1004. Do not use the 1004, right?
That is a mortgage form. It specifically says, lender, and has a lot of verbiage in there that is directly geared toward lenders.
Right.
And so you don't want to use that form. There are some forms, according to what software you use, that you can do a private appraisal on. But, you can use that, or you can develop a narrative report that is sufficient. You want to provide sales to support your data just like you would in a form report, but you just do it in a way that is not misleading to your client, because the attorney is not an appraiser.
Right.
He's not a mortgage banker. He's not, and the judge. They're not used to reading forms like that. So you want to make your report clear so that it's not considered misleading.
Right. That leads me perfectly into my next question. Do you sometimes have to educate your client about what they need? How do you establish that scope of work for a divorce appraisal?
You ask a lot of questions. When they call you, typically you don't really talk to the attorney much anymore, because they have paralegals that have been schooled on the interviews and that kind of thing. And that's wonderful. It frees the attorney up to do his job, to represent the client. And so, but you ask a lot of questions, what's the appraisal for? How long have they owned it? Who's got occupancy of the house? How old is the house? Have they, one big question is the effective date. That is still applicable no matter what kind of appraisal you're doing. And so do you want the the appraisal report effective date, the date of separation? Do you want it the date of filing? Do you want it, sometimes divorces take 2, 3 or more years. Do you want it current? Over the pandemic, sometimes they would ask for two appraisals. They would want one, the date of filing, and they would want one, the current date, because the market had exploded during that time. And so the equity was, in a lot of situations, the equity was vastly different.
Wow. So what about going to court? What about doing that testimony? That sounds scary to a lot of appraisers. What do you recommend?
There's some good classes out there. I think McKissock has one on expert witness. The first thing I would recommend, if you're considering going down this avenue, is take a class on being an expert witness. That's what I did way back when, is I took a class on being an expert witness. I also did the mock interview with an attorney. And I usually, before I will go into court with any attorney, I want to spend at least 5 minutes with, they send me their list of questions in advance, so I know what they're going to ask me. And I also turn around and say, what do you think opposing counsel is going to ask me?
Right. And as an appraiser, you've got to be careful that you are testifying, and you're testifying related to your appraisal. You're not advocating. You're not giving the attorney what kind of ammunition they need to torpedo the other side's appraisal. Got to be sure you're clear about what hat you're wearing when you're doing.
Well, that's an interesting point, Julie, because sometimes the other side has had another appraisal that's vastly different. And the attorney will say, why? And that's another opportunity to get an assignment. You can say, well, if you would like for me to perform a review of that appraisal, I'll be glad to send you an engagement for that. I can review that appraisal and see if I see any loopholes that would benefit you. 9 times out of 10, they buy that.
You've got to position yourself as the expert. And with your attorney as your client, also when you're in court, you've got to be an advocate for your report and your value conclusions, and not be afraid to say, this is why what I'm saying is correct. And if you've never testified in court, and you've never had someone whose job it was to try and poke holes in your process, it makes you a much stronger appraiser to have to defend your work, not just to someone who's working against you, but to someone who's not an appraiser. I think that's a valuable tool to appraise.
Well, Julie, most people don't realize that most court proceedings are open forum, which means you can go sit in. You can be an audience member at almost any court hearing.
Okay.
And so if you're considering being an expert witness for someone, you know, it might pay dividends just to go sit in and listen to how one goes, so that you know the procedure. You know, you know where to sit. You know you know that you're going to be sworn in at this point, and you know the proper protocol, because that gives you credibility just in walking up to the stand.
And you know to turn your cell phone off or leave it in the car.
You know, you better leave it in the car. Better you're going to get it. You're either going to get it confiscated, or it's going to cost you $200 in most courts to get it back.
Wow. So you mentioned how you got into divorce appraisal work. How would you recommend, you said take a class, but how else would you recommend that an appraiser who might be interested in this type of work, what should they do to get their foot in the door?
Use your contact list. I know I've got a friend that still calls it your Rolodex, but you know, we don't have Rolodexes anymore, Julie. And so we use your contact list. You know, I don't know if I can say, you know, if you go to church, if you know somebody that works for an attorney, make sure they know you're an appraiser.
Right.
If you know someone going through a divorce, you know, don't be shy. Just say, hey, I'm an appraiser. If y'all have to have an evaluation, I'd love to help you out.
Right. And
you
those
know,
local chambers of commerce, networking groups, civic groups, you know, I think we underestimate those.
The attorneys have a group, you know, they're like everybody else. I call it a club. Everybody has a club.
Okay.
You know, an association that they're a member of. And the bar is no exception. So, you know, take them coffee, take them donuts. I was somewhere in that, and people were saying, well, you just can't get in to see the attorney. Those paralegals and assistants won't let you pass the door. And I'm like, you don't want to be past them, because those are the people making the decisions. The attorney signs off on it. But those people, that paralegal, I guarantee you want her in your pocket.
Right. I had a note in my script here, and it said, don't overlook the paralegal or administrative assistant. They frequently hold the keys. So
Amen.
Most definitely.
Say that again, because that is a fact, folks. They are the lock and key holder, and you know, and they love Starbucks. Let me just tell you.
A little Starbucks goes a long way.
And you know, I'm not advocating for Starbucks, but they're almost on every corner. So
sure.
You know, and they work hard. Those men and women do work very hard, and so you want to have that relationship, and that's what any client is. You want to build that relationship, whether it's an AMC, a federal credit union, or an attorney, probate court work, assessors work.
Sure.
You want to build that relationship and have them there, and you know, and throw your, you know, I still am old school enough that I carry business cards. I know I've got that pop thing that's got my electronic business card, that I'm still old school and that I carry business cards in my pocket all the time.
I believe
and if
I
someone
have one.
says, hey, how could I call you and talk more about this?
Right.
Bang. I'm going to hand them my business card.
So, you know, there's that old saying that, you know, nothing is certain except death and taxes. But I would also throw divorce in there as well. Whether the economy is going up or down, the market's going crazy or it's dead, people are still going to be getting divorced, unfortunately. But they are.
Unfortunately, you know, if you look at statistics, you're right. First time divorce, second time divorce, and so on and so forth. It's there. And so, you know, mortgage rates go up and down.
Right.
AMC companies may come and go. Business through them may come and go, but people die every day. Look at your obituaries in your town.
Sure.
And if they own property, when they go to file that probate, to read the will and probate the will, or if it's without a will, that's even a little more complicated. They have to have an appraisal to go on what is, it's called the warrant of appraisement form, and they have to have a value to put on that. And folks, I don't recommend using the tax value.
Right.
Because you're going to end up paying capital gains if you do.
So one question, these types of appraisals can get a little testy. You have clients and parties in the situation that may be a little adversarial. Nobody's happy to get a divorce and try to settle a property value. One party typically is getting, maybe half the equity. It can get adversarial. How do you handle those situations where maybe you're meeting a party who is not your client, but a party to the divorce that maybe isn't too happy to see you? How do you handle that?
You've got to have grace with anyone. It doesn't matter who it is. Of course, I've already disclosed if somebody hasn't figured it out, I am from the South.
What?
And so you've just, yeah, for real. You just show grace, and understanding. I am divorced, and so I can say, hey, I've been there. Mm-hmm. I know it's hard.
Right.
It's okay.
Right.
You will, and I assure them, I don't care which side it's on that I'm meeting. I don't care if you're my client or you the defendant,
right?
Plaintiff or defendant. I don't care. I try to be graceful and treat people the way I would like to be treated if it were me. Be graceful. I know this is hard. You will get through this. Mm-hmm. If they're controversial and you feel threatened, you should always take the law with you.
Sure.
You have the right to have a police officer on site. Mm-hmm. If you feel threatened or you feel that it could come to that. I have had to do that more than once.
Yep.
And I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not putting myself in harm's way. I've got grandchildren that want mama to be here for a long time.
Right. Better safe than sorry. Sure.
Better safe than sorry. So, but, if it's non-threatening, just be graceful and just be polite. But remind them that you're here to do your job. Mm-hmm. And that and people will say, oh, well, this or that. I've done this since then. And I'm like, well, you want to remind them that the effective date ordered by the judge is such and such. Sure. And so if you have done improvements since that date and can provide me with receipts, then I can give that consideration. Sure. But, if they're trying to sway you, just make sure you get the factual data mm-hmm. for the information that they're giving you. And receipts is a telltale on that. If they added that deck, sure. or if they put a new roof on, or something that would have value.
Right. Yeah, and just reminding them that you are the neutral third party. You don't have any, quote, skin in the game. You are just there to set the value. You're not on a side.
And you remind people that market value is just that. Mm-hmm. There are no lows, there are no highs, there is market value.
Right.
So when they say, I need a low appraisal, I can give you market value.
I can give you an appraisal. I can't give you a low or a high appraisal. Right.
Correct.
Right. Yeah, staying neutral sometimes is difficult because you are dealing with humans and emotions, and they are very invested in the transaction itself. Sure.
I do make sure I throw a couple of the GSE's definitions in there, on condition and quality, because a lot of times I have found when I'm reviewing an appraisal for the opposing counsel, mm-hmm. The difference in the values is in the perceived quality, or in the perceived condition. Sure. And so if you are giving adjustments in your, because I mean your work file is the same.
Sure.
Okay, let's make sure we let people know the work file requirements is the same regardless of what kind of appraisal you're doing. So in your work file, you want to make sure that your adjustments are supported,
right,
and that, you know, per the definitions that are set out before us, that your adjustments are supported, and you can recreate it that way.
Great. So before we wrap up, Malinda, is there anything you would like us to take with us if we're interested in doing divorce appraisals? Any last nuggets of wisdom?
Go get it. You know, the one thing you can, that's a work avenue that is not going to go away, folks. As we said, divorce rates have gone up every decade since my career started 32 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so go after that segment of work. People are going to get divorced every day. Just look at the family court docket. They're, right, you know, they're months and months and months backlogged. Go after the probate work. They too are backlogged because baby boomers are passing.
True.
Baby boomers are passing, and so are starting to anyway. So go after that segment of work. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for listening to Beyond the Numbers with McKissock Appraisal, and a huge thank you to the formidable Malinda Griffin for joining us today. Learn more about how to diversify your business with our continuing education course, Divorce and Estate Appraisals, Elements of Non-Lender Work, linked to in the show notes. And as always, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. Join us next week where I'll be speaking with Carol Henryson on how to use social media to grow your business and build trust in the profession at large. Thanks for being here. Thanks for tuning in to this week's Beyond the Numbers. If you'd like to stay at the forefront of appraisal news, boost your career, or just learn more about the profession, be sure to subscribe to Beyond the Numbers with McKissock Appraisal at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for stopping by.